So my collection of Amoauge fragrances has been growing and growing. I've been really interested in Amouage's older fragrances, and this one right here, Imitation Woman, was love at first sniff. I recently added this to my collection and fell in love with it the minute I put my nose on this interesting, complex, beautiful fragrance that I'm really excited to talk about today. Hello guys, welcome back. I'm Eloise. I hope everyone is doing great. So today we're talking about a recent acquisition from the house of Amouage, Imitation Woman. This fragrance is one of Amouage's older fragrances. It was released in 2018. The nose behind this is Pierre Negrin, and this fragrance was actually launched right before Christopher Chang left Amoauge. He left in 2019, and so this was one of the fragrances that was launched right before he left the house. And I would say that, like others have said, the fragrances after the Chang era are definitely a bit different. I find that they're not as complex and as interesting as some of the older fragrances like Memoir Woman, Jubilation 25, Imitation Woman. In my opinion, the complexity is just not there in a lot of the later releases. And this one for me was love at first sniff. The minute I got my nose on this, I knew I loved this fragrance and had to have it. And I started out by purchasing the 1.7 ounce bottle, which is right here, and it really packs a lot of juice in what appears to be such a tiny bottle. The 1.7 ounce bottles are really cute. I have several of them, and the only reason that I purchased this size is that I got a really good deal and I had some points and rewards, and I got this for under $100 and followed up with a 3.4 ounce bottle that's on the way. So in terms of the presentation, this bottle, like the other Amouage bottles that I have in the woman's line of fragrances, comes in the rectangular glass bottle with the indents on the side. It's a nice heavy bottle that seems to have quality behind it. And this particular bottle has the name of the fragrance on the side. It says Imitation. And the name of the fragrance is also placed on the cap on this particular bottle. So to be honest, I haven't really done any research with regard to the year that this bottle was produced, this particular one that I have here. I'm not sure if the 3.4 ounce bottles also have the name on the side and on the cap. I thought it was a feature of some of the older fragrances, but the cap is magnetic, so I'll have to look into the batch code just out of curiosity to see when this particular bottle was released. But to me, it matters very little. I'm really enjoying this. I loved it when I tested the fragrance, and I love the fragrance that's in this bottle. So regardless of any reformulation since 2018, and not that I've heard that there has been any, but even if there is, I'm loving this and I'm really enjoying what this smells like. So I have a 4-hour dry down on my right arm. It's my scent of the day. I wore this a few times last week as well, but I'm gonna spray it now as usual so we can talk about what this smells like. This is such an intoxicating fragrance right from the opening. It opens with this beautiful blast of creamy florals, orange blossom, rose, jasmine, ylang ylang, and right from the outset, I get the aldehydic component to the fragrance. So it's this bold, aldehydic floral fragrance that's really unapologetic, and it's really a throwback to some of the older, bold, in-your-face floral fragrances that are completely unapologetic and are very different from the fragrances that a lot of people like nowadays that are soft and sweet and much, much more subdued. This is definitely a bold fragrance, and even though it opens as a bold floral fragrance, it's never bright and it's never super feminine. There's something a bit dark and sort of mysterious about these florals. And I think the best way that I can describe it is that these florals come off, to my nose, sort of muddled together in a way that it's difficult to pinpoint exactly which flower you're smelling. They're all sort of muddled together, and you get that it's a floral, an aldehydic floral, but they're behind this black currant that is a big part of this fragrance. Is a black currant bud note in the fragrance that gives this sort of almost tart, berry-like, darkened, fruity aspect to the fragrance that sort of envelops these creamy florals. So this combination of this black currant with these beautiful florals and the aldehydes in here makes for a beautiful, beautiful, unique opening. And like I said, the black currant bud in here plays a big role, along with the licorice that comes through as the fragrance dries down. And the fragrance is a floral, fruity fragrance that's characterized as a chypre fragrance on Fragrantica. But the fruit is never a bright, sweet fruit. The fragrance is not bright and sweet. It's more of a tart, dark sort of fruit. So if you picture a strawberry, you would imagine sweetness and brightness, or pear has like a juiciness and a freshness. Here, the fruity aspect is always like a syrupy, darkened, tart sort of fruit that's so mysterious and beautiful. It's stunning against the flowers and that licorice note that comes through. So if you've ever had preserve like on toast, I happen to like different preserves on toast. And there was a time that I was eating strawberry preserves or jam, and a time that I switched over to dark berries or blackberries. So I would say that the fruity aspect to this fragrance kind of reminds me of that sort of dark blackberry jam where you have a syrupy nature to it and it's slightly sweetened, but it's not a sugary sweet. It's like a tart, almost a little sour sweetness. That's what you have here with the fruit against those flowers. And along with the black currant in here comes a little bit of green, like a green facet to the fragrance. And so it's not only tart and green, there is something a little sour. And I saw someone review this fragrance and describe it as being animalic, and I think the word was something a little fecal and off-putting in the opening. I don't get that whatsoever, but fragrances are subjective, as we know, and they come off different to each person's nose. So I'm not criticizing the way someone else might describe the fragrance, but to my nose, there's nothing animalic about this. There's nothing that's fecal or off-putting. What I think is that there's a little bit of tart, almost sourness from the black currant. So that's how it comes off to my nose. But any of those sour qualities, I feel like they subside as the licorice starts to come through, which happens fairly quickly. And you have something similar in Memoir Woman, which has an absinthe note, which comes off like licorice. But that fragrance is a different type of fragrance. But again, you have that syrupy licorice type of sweetness, a darkened sweetness in Memoir Woman that you also have here. And to me, Imitation Woman is all about contrast, and the contrasts in here are absolutely stunning, and it's what makes the fragrance so complex and why I'm such a fan of the older Amoauge fragrances. Jubilation 25, the contrast in that fragrance, it's a chypre fragrance, that beautiful frankincense that runs through. There's incense that runs through this fragrance as well. So in the backdrop, you have incense here as well, but this is all about this contrast, and it makes for an absolutely stunning fragrance. You have this tart black currant part of the fragrance, and you have these creamy florals on the other side. So you have this competition, and while the florals are sort of front and center as you experience the fragrance in the opening, immediately within minutes, I feel that they sort of take a little bit of a back seat behind this black currant note in here, and then the licorice comes through and the incense. And as the fragrance dries down, I feel like the floral aspects take a bit of a back seat, and the licorice and this tart fruitiness are front and center with this incense that runs through. And what you experience coming off of the skin, because we often, or at least I, when I'm reviewing fragrances or testing fragrances, I'm often with my nose up to my arm, which absolutely doesn't bother me with this fragrance. It's beautiful, whether I'm experiencing it wafting off my skin or I put my nose to my arm. It's just so intoxicating and beautiful. And there is, as I'm experiencing it now and talking about it, there is something a little bit sour in the background. So it can be off-putting to those that are more into the Love Tuberose or the Love Delight Amouage fragrances that I would say are less complex and sweeter, more subdued, powdery. They're not bold. I think they're a little more mass appealing, which is fine, but the sourness in here could be off-putting. I'm not experiencing anything sour that's off-putting in the fragrance. I'm just pointing it out for those who might want to test this before making a purchase. But it smells fantastic, and as you're experiencing it coming off the skin, which you experience for hours, 8, 9, 10 hours later, I wore this to work 2 days in a row, and I smelled it coming off of my skin as I was moving around the entire day. So the longevity is excellent. I know I'm jumping around, but the longevity is excellent. And although I describe it as a bold fragrance, the way it wears is kind of subdued and a little reserved. I wouldn't call this a bold, loud, strong fragrance that would bother people around you that are smelling this. It has sort of a soft wear, but the sillage and the projection are excellent, and the longevity. So a friend at work who knows about my channel and knows that I'm always wearing different fragrances will come into the office and ask what I'm wearing. I said nothing about this fragrance on the day that I wore it, and I had it on for about 5-6 hours, and she said, "You smell amazing, what is that?" And she ordered a bottle. So my friend ordered Imitation Woman based on what it smelled like 5-6 hours after I had applied it. I didn't realize that she would be able to smell the fragrance. I was surprised, but she thought it was absolutely beautiful and did smell it. And she was on the other side of my desk and was absolutely loving it. So what I get wafting off my skin as I am experiencing this fragrance throughout the day is essentially a fruity floral fragrance that's not bright, it's not sweet, the florals are not heady and obvious, but it is a subdued mixture of fruits and floral, and the fruit comes off sort of tart and black currant like blackberry, and the sweetness is syrupy, and there's a little bit of incense running through, and the licorice is a big part of the fragrance together with that tartness from the fruit. And I feel like the florals are an accent to this beautiful combination of notes. And when the fragrance fully dries down, I don't always refer to notes in fragrances. Sometimes there are notes that you're not even detecting or experiencing in fragrances. But in this case, I'll mention that there's patchouli in the base. I do get the patchouli when the fragrance dries down. I do. I do get the dry down as this floral, fruity, subdued, almost a little powdery fragrance that still projects off the skin for hours, like I said, but it is darkened and a little more earthy from the patchouli. So it gets a little green and it comes off a little mossy, which explains why it's characterized as a chypre fragrance. So it's a fruity floral chypre that dries down to something of a green base as a backdrop to this fruity floral that gets pretty subdued and powdery. And just as a side note, I mentioned that there's incense in here. It's never a strong incense that overtakes the fragrance. Sort of similar to Jubilation 25, there's frankincense, and I believe in Amouage Woman there's frankincense as well. And I would say that it's what Amoauge does best with these older fragrances. It's sort of weaved into the fragrance just right, just so perfectly, that what it does is give this depth and complexity, and it makes a lot of these fragrances that I mention from Amoauge, like Jubilation 25 and Memoir Woman and this one, it sort of gives this mysterious vibe to the fragrance that brings you to another time and is just such a great olfactory experience as you're wearing it, and really just enjoyable and beautiful. It's really very stunning. It's a stunning fragrance that if you haven't tried and you like the fragrances like Memoir Woman and some of the older Amoauge fragrances, I think this is definitely worth getting your nose on, especially if you like fragrances with absinthe or that licorice note, which is a big part of this fragrance, along with that black currant that's like a nice fruity tart without being sweet and bright. It's done just right. It's done just right, and it's 100% unisex. For that reason, it never goes into the feminine floral category. It never goes into the territory of sweetness and bright fruits. And I think it's a great daytime into evening fragrance. I think it can take you from day to evening. Now, Memoir Woman, to me, just exudes sophistication and a dressy environment. I remember in that video I said, I imagine a man in a tux and a woman in a long black gown with pearls or something like that. It's just so dressy. This, I feel, can be enjoyed as a day fragrance, a very nice, interesting day fragrance that's not choking anyone out, and it's not too bold where it's overwhelming. So I talk about the complexity and I talk about it being unapologetically bold, but it's not an overwhelming fragrance. It doesn't wear in an overwhelming way. So I think this is a great daytime fragrance. I think it's a bit complex for the warm weather. I'm not sure if I imagine this fragrance as a warm weather fragrance. It doesn't come off as fresh. So to me, this is more for colder season, which is right now for me. It's really cold here in New York, so I'm enjoying Imitation Woman by Amoauge. I love wearing this. I've been wearing this a lot to work, and I am looking forward to the bigger bottle. So this one is the 1.7 and the bigger one is on the way. So that's my take on Amouage's Imitation Woman. Let me know in the comments if you guys have gotten your nose on this very interesting, complex, beautiful fragrance, and what your thoughts are if you're familiar with this one. As usual, thank you so much for your support and for watching. Until next time, bye guys.